Welcome back, everybody, to the Daily Rumble. Today, I have a very special guest, an imam down in Dallas, Texas, to talk about all of the Islamophobia that's happening, even from the state and federal governments, as well as some agitators who love to go around to the mosques down there and do the most heinous things under free speech. We have Muhammad Abdullah with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, brother. Please introduce yourself to the audience today.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. As my brother Mike just mentioned, my name is Muhammad Abdullah. I'm an African American. My father and mother were reverts to Islam. So our lineage goes back, I don't know how many generations, but we came over as enslaved human beings from the shores of West Africa some 500 years ago. Some of our lineage traces back to Thomas Jefferson. We have some Native American in our blood. In general, my family's Christian, except my father and mother, brothers and sisters. Oh, my father and mother converted to Islam in the 70s. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, lived in Atlanta for some time, lived in Houston, and now I find myself in Dallas, Texas, and I serve as an imam at Masjid al-Islam, which is the oldest masjid in all of North Texas. It's the first one. And I'm also a chaplain at Children's Health, and plus I indulge in politics from time to time, you could say. So I'm going to be running for office soon. More to come about on that, inshallah. So that's a little bit about myself.
So a lot of people kind of became familiar with you and the masjid down there over I believe it was the Epic Waters Eid celebration where the governor got involved to shut that down. Can you tell it for people who don't know what happened? Can you kind of like revisit that story into what happened with all of that?
Sure. Epic Waters is a water park that is in the city of Grand Prairie in Texas. It's in DFW, which is Dallas Fort Worth. It's a huge metropolitan area. So the city of Grand Prairie has this water park called Epic Waters. It's one of the largest indoor water parks, I think, in the country, but definitely in Texas. It's huge. And so for the past 2 years, my wife and I have rented out the entire park to reserve it for our holiday. And it went without any hiccup. And then this year, because it's pick on a Muslim season right now in Texas. Just to give you a little bit of context, it's election season, and Islamophobes, anti-Islamic bigots, and haters are looking for anything they can find to just suppress Muslims, suppress Islam, and oppress Muslims. And so they got a hold of our flyer this year, somebody, and this right-wing media outlet posted it and shared it, and it kind of went viral that Muslims are renting out a water park and they're reserving it for their Eid. And they made a big deal out of it. So we changed the wording on the flyer to make sure everybody knew it was all inclusive. We never excluded anybody. It was just more about a dress code. So I'm sure you know,
Right.
Mike, that it's hard for us as Muslims to go to water parks because the people generally dress in bathing suits and stuff like that. And our modest dress code is in opposition to that. So most for Muslim families wouldn't go to a water park. So we reserve the water park on this day so that Muslim girls and women can feel comfortable with other people who are all dressed modestly in a water park environment. But we never actually restricted anybody based on religion. It was just a dress code thing. So we updated our information to specify it was just about a dress code. But that didn't satisfy the governor or the haters because it wasn't really about access. It was about let's shut something that says Muslim down so we can show that we're in opposition to Muslims being in America. Really, that's what it's about. And so
Yeah.
even though we changed it, the governor still threatened the city of Grand Prairie to take away $530,000 worth of state funding if they didn't cancel the event without any type of consolidation, any negotiation to change anything, just shut it down point blank, period, or I'm taking away money. And the city folded under his pressure. And actually,
Yeah.
June 1st, which is the day after tomorrow, was the day of the event, supposed to be. So we have some things planned to do a press conference, and it's not over with. We're going to fight this.
Yeah, I mean, that's just blatant religious discrimination, and I wonder if there's some legal precedents that you could utilize to go after the state government, to go after Abbott for that, because he's using the power of the purse of the state to blatantly discriminate against a religion. And so I looked into this story a little bit, And my own background, I grew up Pentecostal. My grandfather was a preacher. He had his own church. And I remember when I was a kid, I mean, we held church events like this where they would rent out a facility, whether it was like a water park or a Chuck E. Cheese or something like that. And it was only for the members of the church. Nobody else could come. And there was a dress code. You couldn't dress provocative or anything like that with the girls. And, you know, the boys, and they would even go so far as to separate the boys and the girls, especially the teenagers, into separate, you know, buses and vans when we would all be going. Nobody ever had a problem with that. And I was looking into it. I mean, there's been multiple events in Texas where it's Christian only, and there's no blowback. The governor is not threatening to pull state funds. So to me, this looks like clear and blatant religious discrimination, which violates the U.S. Constitution, but also Texas's own constitution. So I'm wondering, like, you as a community, are you planning on taking legal action against the state for this blatant act of bigotry towards Muslims?
That's definitely in the cards. There's, like you said, numerous examples of other religious groups reserving a park or a play area or a venue for themselves and their congregants. And that's the whole thing about a private event. You rent out a place and you are the one who controls the ticket sales. And actually, we did
Right.
it 2 years prior. It's not like we haven't done this before. We did the same exact thing without any hiccup. We brought a lot of money to the city of Grand Prairie. The park was happy. The people who attended the Eid event were happy. No problem at all. And so this is clearly religious discrimination. And a lot of people have seen that, including lawyers. And so I don't want to speak too far in advance, but that's definitely an option that we will be pursuing. Now, the event hasn't officially passed yet. Like I said, it's June 1st was the day. So we're waiting to see what happens from there. Maybe they'll make another statement. Maybe they'll consolidate us in some way. But if not, then we will, like is the American way, fight it out in court.
Yeah. I think that's great. I mean, you cannot allow bigotry, racism to just exist. I mean, like I remember the KKK and neo-Nazi groups in the 90s, they were proliferating in places like Montana, Idaho, etc. And civil rights organizations, one way to defeat them was to basically sue them into oblivion. Now, they've raised their ugly head back, but they were able to take away their funding to a large portion, because that is a danger to the United States of America when you allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And I wanted to touch on the fact that, you know, you have Governor Abbott, who is a huge bigot towards Islam, but he's also happy to take money from pro-Israel PACs. So it kind of shows that he has a political narrative and thing going on there when it comes to Muslims, that he has aligned himself with people who want to see all Muslims in the grave. You have people like Jake Lang coming down to Dallas and doing the most horrendous things under the guise, again, of free speech. And he doesn't get arrested for that. He doesn't get arrested for harassment. He doesn't get arrested for disorderly conduct. But then when you just simply try to have a fun day for the kids on a holy celebration, you have the whole weight of the state coming down on you, which just goes to show it's a two-tier system. And a lot of people misconstrue Islam as being something foreign, something that a lot of these Islamophobes have said it's been imported through immigration and rammed down the American throats, but it's not native to America. But it's actually contrary. Islam has been in this country before it was even a country. And a lot of the people that made this country, like you said, your ancestors who were enslaved by white English people, French English people, and Jewish people, because they were the ones who were running the Jewish slave trade in West Africa. They were the ones who were changing the money, writing the contracts. They even owned a lot of the slave ships. A lot of people don't know that, but Islam has been here because a lot of those slaves who came over were from Muslim countries, were from Muslim territories. They were Islam. They were Muslim. And some of them even had their tongues cut out so that they couldn't speak Arabic. They were forbidden from reading and writing in Arabic. So when they did it, they had to do it in secret. These were the people that helped to build this country. And even then, you have a native, like you said, revert to Islam, where a lot of people think that it's only Arabs or it's only Pakistanis. but
Hmm.
it's blacks, it's whites. And then down there in Dallas, you guys have a very unique thing of a large Mexican American Muslim population as well, which is just amazing to see. So tell us a little about it, but like, what is the history of Islam in the United States? Is it this foreign imported thing, or is it also a Native American thing?
I'm glad you asked that. There's a few things that you mentioned there that I wanted to touch on. First, you talked a little bit about the KKK and their influence. And one thing that I want to mention before I talk about Islam's influence in America is the biggest threat to American safety has always been Christian nationalism and white supremacy, and the misuse of the Bible to perpetrate hatred and violence against anybody who didn't fit the mold of white supremacy. And that goes back as far as the establishment of America, when we genocided the Native Americans, and we use the Bible. I'm talking about the forefathers of America. And I belong to that group as much as anybody else. But the thing is, we have to denounce them, whether we're white,
Yeah.
black, Native American, whatever. If we're American, we have to acknowledge its history and denounce it so that it doesn't repeat itself. They use the Bible in a concept called manifest destiny, which was the belief that God gave the Western lands to the white Christians of America to explore and to basically conquer. And they used that concept in order to justify their expansion westward and to kill Native Americans and take their land. Manifest destiny, you can look it up. And then they used a concept called the curse of Ham, which was misused from the Bible as well, in order to continue to perpetrate slavery against African Americans. And that was their battle cry, was that African Americans were genetically less than white Americans. Their brain was smaller and their ability to think was less. And they were intrinsically less advanced than the white race. And so they had
What
the
is
right.
that
Go ahead.
curse of Ham? Like, break that down, because a lot of people don't know what you're saying there.
Okay, so Noah's son in the Bible, he had a son called Ham who was black, and Ham supposedly he was black. Now I don't know exactly how true this is because again they misused the Bible, and this son supposedly had a curse, and because this son was cursed, that made all of his descendants cursed, which are black people who are his descendants supposedly, and so because he was cursed, then black people deserved, and this gave white people authority to then enslave black people. And so the curse of Ham is the concept that they use to continue to perpetrate slavery against blacks. Now, in 2025 or 2024, within the last year or so, you have a sitting U.S. senator mentioned in an interview with Tucker Carlson. Senator's name is Ted Cruz. He said, "My number one mission in the U.S. Senate is to support Israel." And he says, "I learned that from the Bible." He uses the Bible. He says Genesis 12:3 teaches him that whoever blesses Israel shall be blessed. So that's what he uses to give unconditional support to the genocidal, occupational, apartheid government of Israel. Then I look it up and I say, hold on, let me see where the Bible says that at. I go to Genesis 12:3. It says, whoever blesses you shall be blessed. And the you that's mentioned here is Abraham.
Yep.
You know, that the Muslims, we say, Allahumma barik ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim. Oh, Allah bless Abraham, and bless his family. So if anybody's going to be blessed, it should be the Muslims. We bless Abraham at least,
Exactly.
5 times a day in prayer.
Yeah.
And so another misuse of the Bible. The point here is
And
that
doesn't
Christian
that come
Go ahead.
from Schofield's writings where he interpreted that to mean Israel, the modern state of Israel? Because before that, it didn't exist that it was he who supports Israel will be blessed, because it was always Abraham. And then when Scofield, and a lot of people don't know, the Scofield Bible is the Bible that influences heavily the Pentecostal and Baptist Protestant style of Christianity, the pro-Israel style of Christianity. But it never actually originally said Israel. Like you said, it said you, which was in reference to Abraham.
Exactly. And the Schofield Study Bible is like a reference. It's basically like an exegesis text of the Bible that is used by Christian scholars and authorities to support certain ideas in the Bible. And it's very heavily, Israeli influenced, or what do you call them? Zionist influence.
Yeah.
And so you're
Because
right. that
Scofield himself was never an actual Christian theologian.
Mhm.
So he wasn't a scholar of Christianity, and he was able to promote and push out this version of the Bible with some very nefarious funding and stuff. So when you start looking into Scofield, who this guy was, how his version of the Bible was able to be widely distributed when he was a nobody, not a scholar, nothing important. How did all that happen? A lot of questions start to get asked. It's pretty dubious, and a lot of Christians in the United States have absolutely no idea how
No
their Bible
idea.
got influenced by this guy.
Yeah, something to look into. Sheikh Osman, who's a Muslim apologetic, I'm sure you heard of him. He debates non-Muslims a lot on the Bible. He uses the Scofield Bible to denounce a lot of their thinking and how there's contradictions in the Bible. But yeah, he thought that the Jewish people had to return to the Holy Land. He was part of the whole Zionist cult and ideology that the Holy Land belongs to the Jews. And the reason that Christian nationalists agree with that is because they want to see the rapture. They're holding on to
Yeah.
these end time prophecies and this I forget what you call them, the Christians who are waiting for the rapture.
Pretty much all Protestants.
Yeah, they have a different name that I'm thinking of, but they hold on to the idea that Jews need to return to the Holy Land in order to hasten the returning of Jesus and the rapture and all these different type of ideas. So they're not in it because they really believe that, Jews are being oppressed or that they need their own land. They're in it for their own prophecies to be fulfilled. And so at every point in history, from Manifest Destiny to the Curse of Ham to support Israel so that we can be blessed, there's always victims, there's always violence, there's always people who suffer as the consequence of these misrepresentations of the Bible. So I say the biggest threat to American safety is actually Christian nationalism and has never been Islam. Islam in America has always been a religion of peace. You can go back, now we can talk about the introduction of Islam to America. Some people actually have and believe and have documents to support that there were Muslims in America before slavery, before people came from Europe, Muslim explorers. There's some proof and evidence to that, and I don't have that in front of me. So I'll just start with slavery, which we know that up to 30% of enslaved West Africans were Muslims when they came to America. If you ever seen the movie Roots, Kunta Kinte, for example, he was a Muslim from the Mandinka
Yeah.
tribe in West Africa. You have people like Bilali Muhammad, whose document is preserved in the University of West Georgia. He was enslaved on Sapelo Island in Georgia. He wrote a document in Arabic, fiqh of Islamic jurisprudence, which taught Muslims Sharia, coincidentally, how to make wudu. Sharia's personal prescriptions on how you live your life as a Muslim. Teaching Muslims how to purify themselves. Teaching women how to purify themselves after menses. These are in his document, which is preserved in the University of Georgia. You have somebody like Ibn Sa'id, who wrote a biography, the first autobiography of an enslaved person. And he wrote it in Arabic as well. These are Muslim scholars who were enslaved and captured from the shores of West Africa. 30%, that means millions. There's 12 million
Yeah.
supposedly slaves that came from West Africa. 3 million, 4 million of them were Muslim. And so the reason why they weren't able to hold on to their Islam is because it was beat out of them. They were forced into Christianity. So if we want to talk about some forced conversions, when it comes to the US of A, the United States of America, and this land that we're on, the only forced conversions that ever happened on this side of the globe was forced into Christianity.
Exactly.
The narrative is said that Muslims force people into their religion when the Quran clearly says there's no compulsion in religion. But the USA has a clear history of forcing slaves into Christianity. And then in the
And it's not
40s,
even
okay,
just
go ahead.
the United States. I mean, if you go back to the Crusades, it was the same thing. It was convert or die. I mean,
Yeah,
even when they entered Jerusalem, they not only slaughtered all of the Muslims and the Jews, but they also slaughtered all the brown-skinned Christians because they didn't meet their standard. They weren't white, pale-faced Europeans, and therefore they met with the sword as well. When they conquered Al-Andalus, which was Muslim Spain for 400
mhm,
years, they put everybody to the sword. It was either you're going to convert to Christianity or you're going to die. And that's why a large segment of the Jews who lived wonderful lives in Al-Andalus, reaching the highest pinnacles of economic stability and even being in parts of the government and education, etc., they had to flee to Morocco for safety because the Crusaders were either you convert to Christianity or we're going to cut off your head, right? And so this whole narrative of Christianity being the religion of peace and Islam being the religion of conquest and forced conversion, it's always the ones pointing the fingers who are actually the ones doing the crime, right? We see it in Israel right
yeah.
now. Whoa, we're the victims, but they're the ones doing all the crime. So it's the exact same thing has happened throughout Christian history. Once Christianity was adopted by the state and Constantine had converted to Christianity and he made the Roman Empire state religion Christian because Rome was all about conquer and conquest. And as soon as Christianity got melded into that system, now Christianity became about conquer and conquest. Prior to that, it wasn't. Prior to that, there was nobody running around with swords telling people they had to become a Christian because they were just Christian monks, living in caves and fasting and praying to God. And then, but once Constantine took over, Christianity became a forced conversion by warfare theology, and it's remained so to this day.
I appreciate that historical context. I really do, and I know a lot of that, and I've learned a little bit from you right here. But when I talk to Americans, me personally, I like to focus on the American history of it because it makes it so relevant to us, right? Because this happened to my people in my land, and sometimes we can become distant from past histories in other places, and then they want to point to how Islam grew, and then we can argue that it grew by the sword or it grew by actual relational experience with people, and you can go back and forth. But when it comes to an American audience, I always like to point to what we know happened on in this land to my people. And I think we can all relate to that in a more connected way. And if we go back to how Islam was suppressed in the United States of America by slave owners who wanted to systematically take away any attachment to the slaves had to their lineage, to their culture, to their religion, to their language. And it was very vicious chattel slavery. Actually, I think recently the United Nations voted on what was the most heinous crime ever committed in the history of humans on earth. Every single nation voted that the transatlantic slave trade was number one, except for three nations: the United States, Israel, and Argentina for some reason.
Yeah.
There are only three that
Well,
voted that it
Argentina is
wasn't.
just Argentina is just a satellite state of Israel. So I mean that makes perfect sense.
Exactly, right? And so I want to talk about some of the founding fathers and their vision of America and the reason why Islam was able to resurrect itself in America, even though it had been for a long hundreds of years quiet because it was illegal to practice Islam by the slave masters. But James Madison and Thomas Jefferson were very influential when it came to the Constitution and the religious freedoms that we experience today in America. Thomas Jefferson is the one who built a wall, who thought that we should build a wall, not between Texas and Mexico, but that we should build a wall of separation between church and state. James Madison said, "Who does not see that the same authority which can establish Christianity in exclusion of all other religions may establish with that same ease any particular sect of Christians in exclusion of all other sects?"
Yeah.
So the separation of church and state was actually protect the country from becoming a Christian nationalistic country because one sect of Christianity would dominate the other sects. And then James Madison further goes on to say that the Jew and the Gentile, the Christian and the Mohammedan, the Hindu and the infidel of every denomination shall be treated equally under the law. That's our religious
And a lot of
freedoms. They came
Americans
up with
don't know that.
don't know that. The Mohammedans were named specifically by name because Thomas
Yeah.
Jefferson had a Quran. He had an iftar at the White
Yep.
House. The first country to ever recognize the U.S. as a sovereign nation was Morocco. And you can Google this. Look at the Emir of
Yep.
Morocco at the time. His name was, get this, his name was Mohammed Abdullah. So I tell people all the time, you should be very familiar with my name. I was the guy who gave you recognition as a country. And so Islam resurrects itself in the 40s and 50s through the Nation of Islam and the Black Liberation Movement and civil rights when it came to the 60s and 70s. That's where my parents converted into the Nation of Islam with people like Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Elijah Muhammad, obviously. That's a different doctrine than what we believe today as Orthodox Muslims or Sunni Muslims, but that is what resurrected the word Islam and Allah and the Quran in America in the 40s and 50s. Even though they had a different aqidah or belief system than we traditionally hold. But they were very vital in resurrecting just what it meant to be Muslim, what Islam is, and the lineage that we came from as slaves in West Africa and our ancestors' practices and beliefs. And so Malcolm X then goes and make Hajj, the bigger pilgrimage, which people are on, ironically, right now. And he realizes
Yep.
that some of the teachings of Elijah Muhammad were incorrect, that white people weren't actually devils, that we were all meant to worship one God under many different races and ethnicities. And he saw that when he went to Hajj and he was surrounded by 2 million or more Muslims. And he saw whites and blacks standing next to each other and praying together. And he saw the beauty the beauty of Islam, which is in the
The
diversity of
equality.
its people.
Because that's
Equality. There you
the
go.
beautiful thing about the Hajj is you don't know if you could be standing next to a billionaire, a king, a prince. It doesn't matter because everybody's wearing the same simple white garment. There's no security, there's no press, there's no nothing. You're all completely equal, just like when we're born and we're babies
Hmm.
and you go to a baby ward and there's, a black baby and a Mexican baby and a Asian baby and a white baby. Those babies don't know the difference. They just know
Hmm.
they're hungry and they want mama, right? So
Yeah.
it's the same thing. It's so beautiful when you see this sea of people in complete equality. Nobody is above each other, and that's one of the beautiful things I find about Islam is it is the actual cure to racism, because how can you be a Muslim and be a racist? That's contrary to everything Islam teaches.
And that was Malcolm X's statement, right? The only solution to racism is Islam. But you could
Yeah.
imagine that it would be hard for somebody in the 50s and 40s, a black man in America, a black person in America, to see that and believe in that equality. I think it'd be very easy to believe that the white man was a devil because everybody who persecuted you, who inflicted you with hatred, and there was whites only. And the comparison to our flyer being a Muslim Day at the Eid event to it being whites only is a very disturbing comparison because people actually lived through times when whites only was used to actually lynch people, to kill people. Very nefarious intention behind white only, rather than our Eid event being for Muslims because it's our day to celebrate. So I just want to say it would be a little difficult. I would imagine, I could only imagine that it would be difficult for a person to really believe in that equality while living as a black person in the United States in the 1940s and 50s. I could just imagine. So that transition, I think it was necessary to like uplift black people from the conditions that they were in, give them pride about who they were, allow them to know where they came from and what their ancestors were and where that knowledge had been separated from us for a long time. And so the transition was necessary as well for Malcolm X to go and make that Hajj and see the true Islam and then be able to bring that back somewhat. And then the son of Elijah Muhammad, Warithuddin Muhammad, who converted the largest conversion in American history of Muslims in one single day or one single event, happened when he took over the Nation of Islam in 1975 and converted all of the people who were there into Orthodox Islam and Sunni Islam. And so therefore,
Yeah.
that's why we have till today the largest ethnic group of Muslims in America, you alluded to this earlier, is African Americans and white Americans.
Yeah.
25% of Muslims in America are legacy Americans, African Americans or white Americans, 25%. The largest ethnic group of Muslims in America are ethnically American, whether they be white or black or mixed. And all of the other groups make up 75%, but they're different. They're Asian, they're African, they're Middle Eastern, they're European, whatever. But the largest group of Muslims in America are American Muslims. And so part of the propaganda is to divorce what it means to be an American from what it means to be Muslim, overlooking people like Muhammad Ali, who's an American hero, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the
Yeah.
Sky Hook, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. I mean, even modern times, Kyrie Irving, Jaylen Brown. You got so many Muslims. Wembenyama, he was wearing a Moroccan thobe to the basketball game the other day. I don't know if people watch basketball, but there's so many American. Dave Chappelle, Mike Tyson, go on and on and on. But they
Yeah.
want to purposely divorce Americans from Islam to make it seem as something foreign or other. And that's the same scapegoat that they use against Native Americans, against African Americans, against Italian Americans, against Irish Americans, against Haitian Americans, against Somali Americans, and now it's Muslim Americans to make us seem like
You
we
know,
don't belong here.
when you start looking into the history of slavery, before they even started bringing slaves from Africa to the United States, the colonies had a labor problem. And hold on.
Your video froze.
Yeah, we got temporarily disconnected. All right, we're back.
There you go.
So what I was saying is, when you start looking into the history and the formation of the United States, it was a colony of the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, and the French, right?
Mhm.
And so when the first colonies came over here, they didn't actually have any slaves. What they would do is they would get indentured servants. So these were the poorest of poor Europeans. They would sign a contract to come over here, risk their life, and work for free for 5 to 10 years, and then earn their freedom. And they would then be able to go on and become a regular colony resident because there was no citizenship yet. Well, that wasn't effective enough for them because they couldn't get enough Europeans to come and do it. And then you're also giving their freedom, and you're also not enslaving their children. So you don't have this generational enslavement.
Yeah.
So then they came up with this idea of, hey, well, what if we just start kidnapping Africans and bring them over here? They even tried to do slavery with the Native Americans, but that didn't work because the Native Americans, this was their home. So they could easily just run away because they know the territory, they know the land, they have the language, they have the relatives, they know where to go, where to hide, how to fight, all of that. So that didn't work. So that's when they started with the Africans. And the biggest problem that they have always had is, how do we keep the poor white people from rebelling against the rich white people? Because there was no sense of whiteness in Europe. It was, I'm British, I'm German, I'm French, and they would all fight against each other. There was no white unity. But once they created slavery of Africans, the way that they kept the poor white people in the colonies and then the United States to keep them from rebelling against the rich white people was, well, we're all white. We're all in this together. I know you're poor as dirt, and you basically live like you're a slave anyway, but you're white. So we're going to give you a few crumbs, let you go beat on some black people. Don't rebel against us. And unfortunately for the majority, it actually worked, and it still works to this day. When you look at these MAGA files who are worshiping a billionaire to the point where they actually compare him to Jesus Christ.
Crazy.
And he's doing absolutely nothing for them. He's hurting them. But they will suck it up because he's all about restoring white people. But he's only restoring billionaires. And so this is the oldest trick in the book, is where you can use race to create this groupthink, and then you can take advantage. This is what scam artists do all the time.
Yeah.
Like I say, the transatlantic slave trade was the biggest scam in world history, because a few rich white people were able to enslave millions of human beings and make generational wealth, billions and billions of dollars that their kids to this day still benefit from. And now we just see it in the modern times with these tech bros and Trump and all of this stuff, where we got to make Islam the enemy now. Islam is the new uniting factor around white people. We gotta defeat it. While the entire time, right now in New York City, they're getting ready to have the Israeli Day Parade. Why are we having a foreign country parade in our largest city in the world? And this parade's been going on for 63 years. But no, we're not taken over by them. We got to worry about Muslims, right? Big thanks and shout out to Muhammad Abdullah, the Imam of Masjid al-Islam down there in Dallas. Go and check him out. Support the masjid building and the community fund down there. And as always, stay safe, stay free.